Red Cloud Financial Services is your preeminent source for mining industry opportunities. The team provides a unique, tailored marketing program dedicated to reaching the right people from its mining-focused global network, giving clients access to industry-leading events and conferences, retail and institutional marketing, plus an in-house growth-driven digital agency. Red Cloud Financial Services has access to some of the mining industry's most notable companies and CEOs.
Hello and welcome to this Red Cloud live event, Women in Power, Inspiring the Next Generation in Mining. Thank you very much for being with us. I'm Mark Bunting, the host of RCTV. We have a great show lined up for you today with 5 highly successful people, each of whom have taken different paths to the top of the mining sector. They'll be discussing their journeys with us, along with a number of different topics, such as how to succeed in mining. Sounds simple, but it's not. And also they'll be talking about a number of different things, such as how they approach being a mentor and or a role model, how they think the mining sector could better attract talent, especially from younger generations. And they'll also be discussing other topics such as opportunities in green energy and ESG and their visions for the future of the mining sector. So let's introduce our guests now as they come on screen. Let's start with Tracy Primeau, the founder and principal of Agile Bear Consulting, an advisor to Consolidated Uranium, a board member of Ontario Power Generation, and a board member of Women in Nuclear Canada. Elizabeth F. Miller is the vice president of Environment and Responsibility at Seabridge Gold. We've got to Annie Markova, co-founder and business development of Onion Corporation, CEO of Investor View Advisory, and an independent director of Critical Elements Lithium and Silvercrest Metals. Eira Thomas is the co-founder, president, and CEO of Lucara Diamond. She's a director at Suncor Energy and the chair of Suncor's governance committee. And Rayna Schnapp is managing director of institutional sales at Red Cloud Securities. Thank you all very much for being with us today.
Pleasure.
All right, let's get started. We want to begin with some brief overviews from each of you on how you got started, why you got started in the mining sector, and in Tracy's case, the nuclear sector. So we'll start with Tracy. Now, you made the leap from a Bachelor of Arts in History at the University of Waterloo in the early days to being a nuclear operator in training. So how did that come about, and what were some of the motivating factors for you?
Well, it's what University of Waterloo, many of you may know, has an excellent co-op program. And I was allowed to spend a co-op term, 4 months, teaching high school students history. And I was very lucky to realize early on that that was not how I wanted to spend the rest of my career. I came from the nuclear industry. My dad worked at the Bruce site, and he always talked about operators. So I applied, and you know, at the time it was either start again at the University of Waterloo in maybe computer science or math or engineering, or go out and work. And so it's not that exciting. I just was tired of being poor and living on macaroni and ketchup. So I applied to be an operator in training, and I found that all of my natural strengths came together there as far as troubleshooting, science and math, and also it's quite a physical job. So it was a good opportunity for me to, you know, keep in shape without going to the gym.
All right, very good. So you turned your back on macaroni and cheese. Great idea. Now, Elizabeth, you hold a Master of Science and you're a registered biologist. How did your career start, and did you always know you wanted to work in the environment?
Sure. So I was fortunate during my undergraduate degree time and my master's degree time that I was able to work in a co-op type environment where I was employed during the summer months, but was actually able to work in the field and gather that really valuable field experience. As a result of that, as soon as I completed my master's degree, I was able to, and fortunate enough to get a job with an environmental consulting company. And that company really exposed me to a variety of environments, such as hydroelectric projects and mines at varying different stages, ones that were proposed, one that were in operations, and ones that were closed. So really gave me some great experience and exposure to those different environments. Did I always want to be in environment? It was something certainly that as a woman growing up in the Northwest Territories, we always spent a lot of time outside. I was always very curious about the environment around me, and just was able to apply both of those in the mining sector.
Now, Eira, you've said before that your father was a big influence for you, a big mentor, and you followed him into exploration and were part of that team that discovered the Diavik mine. So can you give us a sense of your early days and what some of the inspirations were for you?
Yeah, like Elizabeth, I was really fortunate to spend a lot of my youth in the NWT, so mostly following my father around in the bush when he was exploring for, he was definitely before his time. He was looking for tantalum and niobium and all these rare metals that are in huge demand today. But this was in the 70s and 80s before that opportunity really became obvious. But for me, I knew I wanted to do science. I had originally thought I was going to do medicine. And then I really hated first year taxonomy and decided, maybe I better look at this. And what I loved about geology is that it really covers the gamut in terms of all the sciences. So whether it's biology, physics, or chemistry, it's all wrapped up in one. And I knew from my days in my youth that I really loved to be able to spend time outdoors. So I thought this would be a perfect career, really combining my love of outdoors with treasure hunting. What could be better?
That's great. Absolutely. Now let's move along to Annie. You've spent more than 25 years in the capital markets, including managing more than $2 billion in mutual fund assets. In recent years, you founded not one, but two separate companies. And I'm just wondering, what was your start like and what was inspiring you at the time?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Well, looking back on my career path, I have to say that there were three instances earlier on in my career when I was told by my male supervisors or managers that, well, you're a woman, you're not good at this. Oh, don't bother doing this because nobody's going to hire you to do this. And so after the first time after I graduated from high school, 2 years later, I was on a plane to the United States where I completed my undergraduate and graduate degrees. Then I moved to Canada, and the second occurrence happened there. Somebody told me, you're not going to be good on Bay Street. Nobody's going to hire you. I'm like, okay, watch me. So I got a job. I was an analyst for a while with Canadian institutions. And then my director of research said, well, I'm not going to promote you. You're not going to be good enough in a mining or any other research industry. I'm like, okay, I will just do a sidestep. Within 6 months, I was involved with a different organization. And so I guess my desire to learn, curiosity and ambition to do well kind of made me stand up to the plate and take on a role that I thought was challenging at a time, but very, very exciting. I came into mining through money management, and certainly for me, it was so exciting to open up the geology books and the processing books and trying to learn what is that all about. And I'm really, really very thrilled that today I sit on boards and I could really drive and kind of transfer what I've learned throughout my career and my experiences in helping companies be investable in every way, shape, and form I can. I guess in my later career, this is what has kind of made me start these two companies, especially Anya now is with my colleagues, that we're trying to build a platform to help companies actually with their sustainability journeys.
Well, Andy, you obviously showed everyone wrong, and we're going to be talking more about the ESG throughout the show, as you know. Let's move along to Rayna. You started in equity research at CIBC, and then were increasingly appointed to more prominent roles at the likes of Westwind Partners, Dundee Wealth, and since 2018, Red Cloud Securities. So how would you describe your start, and also what went into your decision to move from research to sales?
Thanks, Mark. I would characterize my entrance into the career as more of a pull rather than a push. I got into capital markets by way of the recruitment process when I was finishing my studies at McGill. And I started in equity research, as you mentioned, and I learned a lot, but I also learned quickly that the part of the job I loved was getting out and speaking to clients rather than writing the research reports and sitting in front of a computer. So I had the opportunity to make that shift at a point that Westwind Partners was looking to rebuild their US business. So I started with them at a time that commodities were very much in favor, covering US institutions. And naturally, the US institutions would turn to Canadian brokers, and still do, for resource product. And so that's where I started working with mining and energy. So I would say my foray to where I've landed now at Red Cloud Securities, where we work solely with institutions and corporates in mining, was very much driven by my clients. I built the rapport, and I fostered the relationships with portfolio managers and corporates in the mining sector.
All right, that's great, Rayna, and thank you for all of you telling us about your career paths. It gives our viewers a much better understanding of who you are and what you've done and how you've accomplished it. Now, let's broaden out the conversation. And just in terms of succeeding in the mining sector, do you think there are particular sets of skills, let's put it, in terms of qualities or attributes that are specific to the mining sector, whereby if someone inherently has them or develops them, then they can and should succeed? Who would like to take that?
Sure. I can maybe start off with that, Mark. So some of the skills I would say that lead to being successful in the mining industry, I don't know that they're different from many of the others, but being hardworking and the ability and the desire to continuously learn. The mining and the exploration industry are constantly changing with advancements in technologies and practices, with regulations, and there's growing emphasis on sustainability. So really the desire to stay up to speed on all of those changes, I think is really important.
You want to follow up on that?
Yeah, listen, I think I completely agree. I think it does require an open mind. This is an industry that, is still evolving. It has been more challenging for women. Let's not kid ourselves. We sit with a participation rate of 15% globally. So certainly women have faced barriers in this industry, but I think for me, I certainly am fortunate that I was always encouraged, and growing up in a mining family definitely helps because you get exposure to the business early. But I think having an open mind and being able to work really collaboratively is key. That's obviously key for many industries, but I think this is an industry that at the end of the day, I think we've realized is its success really hinges on being able to put together, strong, qualified, collaborative teams of people to solve lots of problems, whether it be on the sustainability front or on the technical front. And so I think you really have to have a mind to that kind of team and environment. And I think that's where most of the really successful companies have ventured.
Ira mentioned the low percentage of women in the mining sector. Annie mentioned some of the challenges she faced. Do any of you have stories along those lines whereby you were told no and it really drove you even more?
I'll take that. I mean, I would suggest that we probably all do. Not speaking for the other women here, but I certainly think we do. I have an example where I was pregnant with my first child and told that if I took a mat leave more than a certain time, that I likely wouldn't have a job upon my return. That didn't stop me. I took the time I needed and I returned to my seat after having my child. But that is a struggle that only women would have to face no matter what industry you're in, and something that I think still needs a lot of work in terms of keeping women in any industry, because women make a decision at certain times of their life to have children, and that seems to be a time that sometimes, unfortunately, they're forced to make decisions about their careers.
Yeah, when I applied to go into the control room and be the run the reactors from the control, I was the first woman to do that at Bruce. One of the interview questions I was asked was if I had my husband's permission to apply, and of course I hadn't asked any of the other guys if they had their spouses or partners' permission. Of course, I went on to be successful and run the ops department eventually. But yeah, there was many times where I was challenged on whether I was taking good care of my family and working shift and that type of thing by male supervisors.
Anyone else?
I think it takes.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think it takes a lot of perseverance for all the female participants in the mining to really feel that they're successful in their careers. Let's face it, mining is probably one of the most difficult industries in the world. We go and we have to operate in very challenging environments. We are dealing with so many risks, and yet I think what we bring to the table is that emotional intelligence as to how to tackle things, how to do things. And we tend to roll up our sleeves and solve problems. So I think it's very, very important that we continue those conversations about how to improve that participation. As Eira said, 15% is very low. I have an ambition as a director. I'm driving that to grow to twice that amount within very foreseeable future. And one way we can do it is starting that journey up. What does it take? I don't know how many of you would agree with me, but when you go to on mine trips and mine visits, you're given overalls that don't fit. Your boots that you're schlepping around underground and you're almost losing, you're tripping because they're too big for you. I mean, start with the simple things that can actually improve our effectiveness, being an equal partner within that labor force, within those teams we work with. So the little things make a huge difference. And also being able and be courageous to step up and express our opinions, especially when it comes to doing the right things. It's sometimes very, very difficult to raise your hand and say, well, I think there is a better way. Can I just tell you, and can I show you? When you are alone or you're a minority on that team, it does take a lot of courage. And this is something that we, by encouraging that openness and diversity and inclusion, cultures that would be receptive to alternative views, is so important. These conversations are so very important.
Picking up on that theme, and this goes to anyone, for young women who may be considering the sector or are already in it, do you find that they're keen to be in the sector, or is it a struggle to attract talent? And sort of the second part of that is, and to Annie's point, what are some of the resources and programs that could be improved upon or brought in, and some of the support that could be given to make it more appealing?
Sure. Well, I could take a stab at that one, Mark.
Sure.
So, I mean, I think Annie brought it up where, oftentimes mines are located in isolated locations, and not a lot of the general public often get the opportunity to experience what those opportunities are like and what they could potentially hold. I mean, there's 120 different careers in the mining industry. We frequently go to career fairs around Northwest BC, speaking with community members, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous, as well as students and adults about those career opportunities. And so I think in order to really try and encourage more people to understand those opportunities is by having things like more co-op programs, more student employment programs, looking at breaking down some of those barriers barriers on that work-life balance, particularly for women. Things like the availability of daycare, as an example, and flexible work arrangements, I think, are all aspects that could be improved so that more people are willing to enter into the mining industry.
Yeah, and maybe I'll jump in. I mean, I run a company with an asset in Botswana, and 99% of our workforce is from Botswana. And something that we're very proud of is that 30% of our workforce is female, which is double the average, and 75% of our executive is female. And we have the first ever female managing director of a mine in Botswana. And that achievement has come about because I think fundamentally because women like to work with other high-performing women. Women do like to work hard, and I think they like to be recognized for that. And they also, to Ani's point and Elizabeth and others, is really, and Rayna mentioned this too, but having a conversation where you can talk about your career ambition through the phase of having a family. What is it going to look like, and not being afraid to have those conversations and talk about how you can adapt your workplace or your thinking around the workplace to meet the ambitions of those young female, potential leaders that really are afraid to have those conversations. And I think a lot of the time it's like, what, I'm just lucky enough to have gotten in the door. Now I'm not going to rock the boat until I absolutely have to. And that's exactly the wrong way. If you start out early saying, what, over the next 5 years, this is kind of where I would like to go. How can we work together to make sure that I stay on the right path, and that that you can plan as a business leader, and make this work for everybody. And I think those conversations need to happen earlier.
I also think, and it sounds like Eira's doing it correctly, when young women come into a company and they see women leadership, they know they can get there. If they see that person at the top, whether it's a board member or the executive leadership team, or the manager of the mine, they see that that's a path that's workable for them, and we need to make sure that we're showing them how to get through that path.
But another thing that I'd like to bring here when we talk about how to attract talent to come to work in the mining industry, and any talent, many of you have probably interviewed young people today, and the conversations, their alignment with wanting to change the world, to do better, to make a difference. Mm-hmm. If we can tap into that energy and that desire, our industry, we need to really talk about our industry as the enabler of the future. And we cannot have a future without our industry as the fundamental first step into the supply chain for everything we do, from our phones to houses to cars to whatever it is. So how can we change that perception and actually attract the young minds to think, is there a better way of doing what we're doing? Can we be more efficient? And opening the eyes to the way the mining industry now is, especially the larger companies, are investing a lot of capital into research and development to come up with those automations, the new technology, the implementations, the interconnectivity, the digitization of our mining. This is exciting stuff. This is an area where we can actually be applying space technologies to make us efficient. Why can't we talk about that? Why can't we drive the conversation with where is the real opportunity? Are we there yet as an industry? No, but should we be heading in that direction? And so with that vision as to what is going to be the future of mining and where do we see ourselves, can we start leading those young minds and making room and the path to those careers that would have the flexibility for females to have a more diverse experiences, and maybe a path that would not be necessarily working underground all the time, but an area that could support the operations, maybe from a distance, maybe with skills that are today not typical when we think about mining. So thinking about that new workforce that we need to get our mines efficiently operating in a responsible way. This is what I think we are faced with today as leaders in the organizations.
Would anybody like to pick up on that that theme and that topic? Because it goes to other topics and questions we want to get into, but the in terms of the mining sector evolving the next 5 or 10 years or so, how do you see it going? And in terms of it being more diverse, more inclusive, more appealing to younger generations, because we know that they're very much interested in the green energy shift and ESG. And anybody else want to continue with that?
I think there's some real opportunities for mining in this space, Mark. You know, the younger generation is looking for different things than we were when we started. Well, than I was, and they really do care about clean energy. They really do care about ESG. You know, if as a mining company you're working towards critical minerals that are going to help with EV vehicles or battery storage or even uranium for nuclear power, you know, you're making a difference to climate change. If you have partnerships with Indigenous communities, then you're impacting the S and the ESG. You know, if you have great practices around tailings and mine in general, if you're mining in a third world country and doing things the right way, you know, I think that doing things that make a difference in the world is what will attract younger people, and then also retain them. So I think the mining industry is going to evolve in that way. I think there's going to be more focus on those things. Younger people are going to be interested in getting involved with companies that are doing things right, and so there's an opportunity here for mining to show young people and employees in general all of the right things they're doing. I mean, I'm new to mining, and I've learned a lot in the past, year and a half, 2 years, and I don't think you brag enough about the good stuff you're doing out there.
I think, Tracy, that's a really good point. I was going to say, picking up on what Ani said, and you just said it now, it really is about that awareness. We have to do better as an industry and building awareness around what it is that we do and how vital and critical it is, and that it is part of this new economy, that it's a critical part of this new economy, and it embraces, all those values around new technology and the energy transition. And I don't think we do a particularly good job. We are still painted as kind of this age-old industry that, really was important to Canada 100 years ago, but, is not that important to our future. And that is, obviously not the case. Nothing could be more important than our geological endowment in Canada today, as the world faces this energy transition. But we don't do enough to really educate and celebrate it. I mean, it'd be helpful if we had a government that would stand up and actually celebrate that. But I think as an industry, we could do a much better job. We need to do a better job.
Yeah, I agree with both of the points that Eira and Tracy brought up. I think that over the next, say, 5 to 10 years, the mining industry is really going to look for increasing those opportunities for sustainable mining practices. I mean, obviously, as Tracy was mentioning, having that younger generation try and be interested in mining, and certainly those historic pieces that we've got in the mining industry certainly aren't necessarily positive. So looking towards those sustainable mining practices and really continuing to be heightened awareness around it in our communities, and focusing on making things better with our practices. And also, I think to greater collaboration with both Indigenous and non-Indigenous local communities around where our projects are operating, trying to make sure that we're understanding those local communities, their concerns, and then of course potentially making our projects better, and in involving those people that are in those local communities, and then therefore wanting to be involved in the bettering of the industry overall.
I know that Eira at Lucara Diamond Tracy, as well, and in your activities. You're very involved in local communities, indigenous communities, STEM camps, other initiatives as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the S and the ESG is definitely risen to the forefront here, particularly in the last couple of years, as I think we've done a better job building our credibility around some of our environmental efforts. But the S is super critical, because we really want to be able to demonstrate the value that this industry brings, not just to our shareholders, but to the broader communities in which we work and operate. In Canada, it's particularly important for the Indigenous communities. Where I'm working in Africa, the issues are slightly different, but again, very much focused on how we can work to meet the needs of these communities. And I think it's not about companies kind of arriving on the scene and prescribing, the potential benefit that they can bring. It's really about listening and understanding what their priorities are and how you can kind of work together to achieve those priorities. So, a lot of the things that we're doing in Botswana, aren't necessarily, big ticket items where you're writing big checks. It's really about identifying the priorities at any particular time. And through COVID, for example, building awareness around gender-based violence has been a huge priority for our communities of interest. Food security, Botswana is incredibly reliant on importing food from South Africa. So how can we work to support agricultural projects that, can really transform the sustainable development opportunities for some of our communities. So all of these things are quite different than the way we would approach our sustainability efforts in Canada. But for us, it's been far more effective to get a team on the ground in meeting regularly with those communities and developing programs around their needs, as opposed to, where we started was with high-priced consultants, coming in and telling us what we ought to be doing, which were not very effective at all. So we've really kind of evolved our thinking in that respect, and I think we've been far more successful as a result of really focusing in on those very specific needs. Yes, STEM, focusing on girls and young women has been a big focus for us in Botswana, trying to increase participation, but some of the smaller things sometimes have had the most impact.
And Mark, if I can just add to this topic, it is not only important for the mining companies and for recruitment of new talent into mining, it is becoming increasingly more important on the capital market side to the investment dollar. The grade of your deposit, the location of your deposit is not always the most important thing anymore. More and more portfolio managers and those who are providing capital are putting ESG at the top of their investment criteria, and that's certainly something that has evolved over the past little while.
Thanks for jumping in, Rayna. That was actually my next question. I wanted to get your capital markets view on what everybody's been talking about. Shifting gears a little bit here, two-part question for each of you. What advice would you give to your younger self, and what advice would you give to a young person, young woman, coming into the sector or thinking about getting into mining? Who wants to start?
I'll start because I finished, so I'll start. I think that the most important thing is to believe in yourself and your abilities, to align yourself with people you respect and who respect you. And also you have common goals. And I think most importantly, align yourself with organizations and people who want to see you succeed and will help you get to your goals.
I probably will jump in as well. I would give the same advice to anyone, even myself. Do never, ever compromise with your ethics. Stand up for what's right. because it is up to us to defend the values of our organizations. And if there's an alignment with your personal values, this is where people could be most impactful. And this is where we can make a real difference with whatever the jobs we have. Mining industry offers phenomenal opportunities for quite a diverse skills and growth, because it combines so many aspects of geology, processing, technology. It's phenomenal industry that attracts a very, very unique group of people that I have observed being naturally collaborative and open and sharing. This is something that's not typical for other industries. So I think I would like to encourage all the young people, give it a shot. It's really a great career.
Yeah, my advice wouldn't be that much different actually than Annie's. I would say, don't try to be someone you're not. Don't try to change to fit in. You know, don't learn to play golf just because that's where you'll get the deals done. I mean, unless you love golf, then that's fine. So I'd say be authentic. You know, don't change your values and who you are in order to move up, because you know, if you don't, if you stick to your values and your ethics, you will find yourself getting opportunities just because of that, because everyone knows who you are and what you bring to the table. I mean, I would give the same advice to a young person, but I would also say to a young person, because I feel like a lot of young people don't know about mining, you know, go out and do some research, look at the excellent scholarships that are available from mining companies. See if you can actually go see a mine or you know, learn a little bit about it. And, you know, with my cousins who live in northern Quebec, I would say, you know, sometimes we sit around the table and they don't know about the actual opportunities that are out there. So that's what I would encourage people to do. Go find out what opportunities there are, because I feel like I feel like people don't realize how great they are. For example, I have a nephew who's looking at engineering, and he had never even considered mining until we got talking about it recently. Like, that wasn't even in his eyesight. That's what I would encourage young people to do. Go have a look at what's available.
Eira, I'm just going to jump in. I know that you've said before, your advice to your younger self is don't be so hard on yourself. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think sometimes when we, you know, particularly if you feel like you're in a minority position and you're, you know, you feel like you're trying to compete in a way that, you know, is not really fair. And I think that would absolutely remain my advice. You know, you can't push a giant boulder uphill. I think Ani said at the beginning, you know, she made a decision to sidestep because she clearly wasn't going to get the support in you know, the role that she was pursuing. And I think there is a point where you, what has been said here, I mean, being authentic and true to yourself, recognizing that you deserve to be there, and you do your job. And if you face, you know, adversity in spite of all of that, yeah, don't be so tough on yourself. Make a decision to get yourself into a better situation, because working with the right people that are pulling on the same rope, that are aligned with your vision and values, is super critical. And you will find it. So, you know, don't be too hard, don't be too hyper critical at the outset, and be open-minded to those needs and opportunities.
Great. I think it's hard to go last with all my fellow panelists giving such great advice. The only thing I might add is, and I think, you know, a number of you already spoke about it, but is to look for opportunities to gain that experience, whether it be co-op programs or summer student programs, just so you can get that experience and try it out. I do think the mining industry has a lot of opportunities, so it is a really great place to be. And what I would also say and encourage people that are newly starting out in their careers, once you get that seat at the table, which is, you know, an excellent step, actively participate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just to wrap it up here with just a few more questions and ideas and topics, but and you've touched on it a bit, but what is your vision as diversity and inclusion? What do you want to contribute? How can you contribute? And are you thinking of the legacies you're leaving, or is that not that important to you? You just want to do good work? Who wants to start? Tracy?
Sure, I'll start. I mean, my focus has in mining so far really has been bringing the Indigenous voice to the board table. So although I care a lot about women in STEM and gender diversity, I had no idea the number was 15, Ani, so I'll make note of that now. But I want to make sure that Indigenous communities, or mining companies, Indigenous communities, are having respectful and fruitful discussions. And so I guess if I had any dream or something I would walk away with, there would be more partnerships, more Indigenous leaders on boards and on executive teams, and really seeing the mining community, Indigenous communities coming together in more of a team spirit, which I do see with some companies, so don't get me wrong, rather than legal or negotiations all the time. I have this, my sister uses this great phrase called relationships are built on the speed of trust, and I'd like to contribute in that way, increasing the trust that Indigenous communities have with mining companies.
My contribution, especially as a director, is being part of the construction of policies and cultures that are focused on the diversity, equity, and inclusion, because only by giving that platform for everyone to hear each other and to collaborate in a constructive way, we can get successful organizations. And so from that point of view, I think that we need to pay attention to the details. We need to listen to all the females that are coming behind us, and to open the door, have an open door. Anybody who needs advice or needs to talk to and be heard. This is what we're good at. We listen. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's all that it takes. You need to listen before making a big decision. So this is what I'd like my legacy to be able to move that needle, to improve that inclusion and diversity within the companies that I'm involved with.
I think maybe I can go next. Building on what Ani said, I think that, for me, and as I think about legacy, diversity and inclusion is super high on that list. But part of it really is around just being able to reach out to that next generation and engage both young women and young men to consider a career in this industry, because I think we've got a really challenging demographic, and we've got a big disconnect out there in the world between, this strong momentum and move towards, a greener and a greener climate and an energy space versus where we're at today. And so we have to get there, and we have to build a consensus and support, and it really has to come from those younger generations. So it's certainly important to get young women in there, but I also think it's really important to get young men, and building the awareness of how this energy transition is actually going to happen, and to take ownership of that as a younger generation and be part of it, be part of making the decisions that are going to have an impact and affect positive change, and at the same time take responsibility for it. So I do think that the path is greater diversity and inclusion, but I think we have to be really proactive in getting out there to reach those younger generations and to convince them. And I for one am pretty optimistic, and I am in a specialized part of the mining industry. I'm producing diamonds in Botswana, and arguably you could say, well, who needs diamonds? They're not part of the energy transition. They're not providing energy that the world needs. But, we employ 1,200 local Botswanans, and we have contributed to infrastructure in a country that now has hospitals and universities and the ability to educate younger generations who in turn are really changing the economic outlook of their own countries. So we feel like we're a critical part of it. And what I'm most encouraged by is that, I now have younger participants in the value chain. For example, a young jewelry designer out of New York who has come to us to say, you know what, I only want my diamonds to come from your mine because I can read your sustainability report and I know, what you're doing locally on the ground. I love the fact that you're 99% Botswanan. I love the fact that you've got 30% women. And, this is important to me as a Generation Z, business owner. And I want to learn more. And, I brought her to the mine, first mine she's ever been to in her life. And it's not just changing her view on, what we're doing as a company. It's about the industry and about connecting the dots, whether it be, in uranium or copper or gold. And I think we've got to do a lot more. So for me, I hope my legacy is to really try and enhance those kind of interactions and to educate and to really build on the momentum, the good momentum we've had in the last few years, so that we are able to increase that awareness, the acceptance over what each of us do each and every day, and is something that's really essential to a strong kind of economic future for the whole world.
So maybe I'll just add on to that. All the comments that have been coming from the panel are just so great. And I would say, I've been fortunate to work with Seabridge Gold in the VP role with environment and social responsibility. And so I feel like, some of the visions that I have for the company and for mining overall is, and for me to be a piece of improving the sustainability and social responsible mining. So a lot of that is around Tracy's comments about being involved in getting those communities involved, as Eira mentioned as well, getting them involved in benefiting from your projects and where you operate, and also listening and hearing the questions and concerns that come out, whether it be from the staff members. So encouraging them to bring their comments forward so they can be considered. Also the same with the community members. So really is that relationship piece and really trying to listen and make improvements for the projects.
And Rayna?
I was just going to kind of pull on what a few things that the other ladies said. I can't really speak to the boots on the ground mining, or as Ani would say, the properly fitting boots on the ground. But I think it's important. Ira mentioned earlier that young females come into her business and see females in senior positions. I think it's really important for senior females, whether you're working for a mining company or working in capital markets like I am, to take on very strong mentorship roles. Not only with younger women, but as Ira said, with younger men as well. It's really important for the younger generation, both women and men, to see women in powerful positions and be able to work with them properly. So I would just say, as senior women, we all need to take the time and mentor younger women, doing things like this, what Red Cloud has done all month, highlighting women in senior positions is also exceptionally important for the future of the mining business.
Lastly, is there anything we haven't talked about that you'd like to touch on or follow up on?
The only other comment I would say is I appreciate the conversation, and it's been great to sit on this panel with women that are in these leadership roles. And obviously, everyone got here by working extremely hard in their respective industries, and it's a pleasure to have conversations about women in mining and diversity with this group.
Well, it definitely was a fascinating and informative discussion. We thank you all so much. And we hope to see you down the road and do it again sometime.
Thank you very much. Well said, Elizabeth. I agree. Thank you, fellow panelists. It was a good discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know.
And
thank you for your attention.
For joining us. We appreciate it. Take care. We'll see you next time.